a certain power that in little ways of relatedness, the vision was always breaking through. We would call it an insight that was a derivative from this experience. And we see very clearly something else that in the kind of, in the moment of vision, one of the things that happens is the man becomes aware of his gifts, of his particular, peculiar gifts. And one of the gifts of which Jesus became aware was the gift of healing. And I'd like to pause to comment a little about this. I think that there is a gift of healing, just as any other gift. I think a man who studies medicine, who becomes a doctor, and who has a gift of healing, becomes an extraordinary person. But he can be a doctor without the gift of healing. And he does something. But there's a magic that the gift of healing has that addresses, stimulates, calls forth a quality in the sick person of which the sick person was not aware until it was called forth by this healing. Now, I realize that there are all kinds of focus that turn up the moment I mentioned this. About 10 years ago, Margaret Rhodes wrote a book about a woman who lived in Minneapolis, Mrs. somebody, who was a healer. And I live on the edge of curiosity all the time. I'm always sniffing things that seem to be out of my line that would throw light on my life. So when I found that this lady, after reading her biography, and I found that she lived in Minneapolis, I was going there for a weekend, and I wrote her ahead of time asking her if she could give me a half hour on Saturday evening. I wanted to visit. So when I got to the hotel, there was a note from her saying that the appointment was 7:30 that evening. And I went out to her apartment. I was met at the door by her sister, who was dressed in a nurse's white business. And she took me into a small room, which apparently was a treatment room. There was sparsely furnished. There was a table, and on the table was an old Bible. On the wall above the table was a print of Hofmann's Head of Christ. To the left against the wall was an old-fashioned doctor's treatment, what do you call it? treatment on the table afterwards, and done in a bright kind of chintz, and then a little stew. And I was told to be seated in a chair, and presently Mrs. Rhodes, that's her name, Mrs. Rhodes came in. And when she came, the first thing I noticed that she had a goya that hung way down. She was a healer. And I said to myself, even you are under the most overwhelming kind of insistent commitment and passion to do this, or you are one of the most brazen human beings I've ever seen. Just the leader is healing people. So we introduced ourselves, and we began to talk. And I said, I had never met a live healer before, I said. So that's why I'm here. I'm curious. Tell me a little about you. And she said, I'm a simple farm woman. I think she said she's maybe second or third grade. The age at that time was perhaps 70. She'd been here maybe 2 or 3 years. And I said, tell me, what happened? And she said that one morning she felt a hand on her shoulder. There wasn't anybody there. She felt the hand. And she was told that from that time on until such time as there was a change, her life was under the direct direction or control of a spiritual person's life. Well, I settled back in my chair. I said, well, how does it work? She said, when someone comes to see me, who is sick, he, referring to this person, tells me what to say. He tells me what the disease is, where it is located, where to place my hand, and at the same time, he tells me whether or not healing can come through me to heal the disease. And I obey. So that some people who come, as soon as I touch them, I'm told that no creative energy can flow through me to touch this thing in them, and they need not come back. Other times, yes. When I got through that with my mind, and then she said, last night a very extraordinary thing happened, which never happened before. I was asleep. And I was shaken. And I was told to get up and go to my desk, take my pencil and paper and write. And I was told that I was to write a symposium on the soul. And I said, have to spell symposium because I've never heard of it. And I was told that my job was to write and not to ask. So I wrote about 10 pages. And I looked at my watch, and my half hour was up. And knowing how I wish people who came to talk to me would observe the time, I said, my half hour is up, and I don't want to stay a minute longer because this is all I asked for. And she said, oh, stay another half hour. So I settled back. And we talked more about this strange energy that flowed through her, that she could not control, but that came at a moment in her life when she was milking the cow one day. And just before the half hour was up, she said, maybe pray. Would you be invited? Oh, I said, oh no, I'm not prayer. I said, so there was a silent prayer, and she said, I don't remember if you don't words on what you were talking about. And I realized that she'd stopped talking. She'd stopped verbalizing for some time. And when I opened my eyes, her eyes were riveted on my hand. And she said that when I looked at your hand, I have it like this. All of the inside of your hand are worn. But he tells me to tell you to pay no attention to that, but to keep your hand holding firmly the thing that they're holding. Now, I don't know what that means. Does it make any sense to you? She said to me. I said, I don't know. I have to put it in my hopper and see what comes out of it. As I was leaving, I said, I'm going back to Boston tomorrow afternoon. But do you have the things that you wrote the other night? I would like to read them. Let me keep them overnight, and I return them by messenger or bring them to you by 10 o'clock the next morning. And she let me have them. And my kind of street would not let me copy them for myself. Since that time, I think I regretted that I did. But when I read it, this thing was amazing to me. Here was a detailed discussion of the Platonic theory of the soul, which we'll be talking about when we get to Plotinus and the Neophysics. Just a detailed, careful statement of the Platonic doctrine of the origin of the soul and so forth. Now, I digress to tell you this. Because we live surrounded by the mystery of life. And now and then, there comes a moment in a man's life or a person's life, as was in the talk about it like this. When the primary private wall, shell, skin, whatever it is, that marks the individual life off from the whole is transcended, is broken, is wrenched. And there flows into the life something that the individual is aware of as having always been there. And then the wall rises again, and your private individual life becomes yours. But never the same. Quite. Never. And how it manifests itself, time's gone, and how it manifests itself subsequently depends upon how the person defines his vocation. So that we see in the life of Jesus, stripped of all of the theology and the Christology and all of it, what we see in the life of Jesus is the thing that happens when the implication of the vision, the experience of illumination casts shafts of light on the path that the individual will follow for the rest of the day. And therefore, there is a very striking intimate relationship between the inner experience, the inner vision, and the most radical kinds of changes in social order. And the mystic experience, instead of its being life denied, does in that way become life affirmed. And the rhythmic beat maintains itself in what a man like Hawking called the principle of alternation. Well, we'll quit. He understood what it is that we are trying to work out. He was very old and from the secret swing of planets to the secret decencies in human hearts, he understood. I used to watch him watering his lawn and scattering the food for the woodpecker, sweeping the crossing before his house. It was not that there was light about him visible to the eye, as in the old painting. Rather, an influence came from him in little breaths. When we were with him, we became other. He saw us all as if we were that which we dreamed ourselves. He saw the town already closed for its tomorrow. He saw the world beating like a heart, beating like a heart. How may I, too, know? I wanted to cry to him. Instead, I only said, "And how is it with you today?" But he answered both questions by the look in his eyes. For he had come to quietness. He had come to the place where sun and moon meet, and where the spaces of the heavens open their doors. He was understanding and love and the silence. He was the voice of these, as he said the woodpecker. And then this. When my own life feels small and I am oppressed with it, I like to crush together and see it in a picture, in an instant, a multitude of disconnected, unlike phases of human life. A medieval monk with his string of beads pacing the quiet orchard, and looking up from the grass at his feet to the heavy fruit trees. Little Malay boys playing naked on a shining sea beach. A Hindu philosopher alone under his banyan tree, thinking, so that in the thought of God he may lose himself. A troop of bacchanalians dressed in white, with crowns of vine leaves, dancing along the Roman streets. An Epicurean discoursing at a Roman bath to a knot of his disciples on the nature of happiness. A martyr on the night of his death, looking through the narrow window to the sky and feeling that already he has the wings that shall bear him up. A Kafir witch doctor seeking for herbs by moonlight, while from the huts on the hillside come the sound of dogs barking and the voices of women and children. A mother giving bread and milk to her children in little wooden basins and singing the evening song. I like to see it all. I feel it run through me, that life belongs to me. It makes my little life larger. It breaks down the narrow walls that shut me in. To capitulate for a minute and start moving along, you will remember that the great primal disclosure that Jesus made in the climactic experience of the baptism was a radical disclosure of who he was. And you remember the imagery, the symbolism that he used. The heavens opened, and the Spirit of God descended upon him like a dove. Symbolism. And he heard the voice say to him, "You are my son, my beloved. This day have I begotten thee, or in thee am I well pleased." And then having this experience of heightened and acute awareness of himself, of his essence, his substance, his core, having been penetrated at what may be called in psychological terms the nerve center of his consent, that this experience created a radical demand upon his life. And the question that he had to answer now, as a derivative from the vision, was, what is the bearing of this disclosure on my life, my journey, my function, my work, my mission? And in order to settle the thing, shake it down, so that he could derive from the experience what may be called, for lack of a better term, a working paper for his life. A working paper that was a derivative from this experience of illumination. And the first step taken in the carrying out of this sense of trying to discover how this awareness of himself as an essential part of God, of the eternal. What difference does that make in how I relate to the other kinds of identity by which I had found my meaning? And this is very important. Now I'll skip the wilderness and move to the body of the rest of the journey. I want to finish this if I can this afternoon, because Platonic is flowing down my neck. first identity with which Jesus had to deal was the identity of belonging. And this, of course, is your first identity, not mine, everybody. What bearing does the vision have on the particular meanings of my own sources of identity? Can I hold clearly and distinctly this new awareness of myself in relation to the eternal? And at the same time, work out some sort of construct with reference to the identity belonging by which I have defined myself by. And with him, it is very critically defined, his identity of belonging was Jewish. He was a Jew. And how can I work out this new awareness that has come to me, my self-awareness, which I discover to be rooted and grounded in God so intimately that I am conscious of the fact that I am his immediate offspring. What does that do with the identity by which I have found my significance up to this time? See the problem? For instance, when as a young man and Judas of Galilee was going around the community trying to get young Jewish men to join him in an insurrection against Rome. Why didn't Jesus join? It is reasonable that he worked in the rebuilding of the city of Sepphoris, which was destroyed as a hostage city by Rome because of this insurrection, that young Jewish men who were his contemporaries, who were part of his life, in which they participated. He didn't go. How could he continue living the life of a Jew in Palestine without locating his identity in his Jewishness? This meant at once, for instance, are the enemies of the Jewish community with which I have my identity. Are the enemies of the Jewish community my enemies? So that much of what we find him doing with reference to the attitude towards enemies, which has become a part of the lip service doctrine that we use in our religion, is located in this critical problem. How must I deal with the enemies of the Jewish community while I remain a Jew who has had this moment that gives to him an awareness that transcends the group identity? And it's interesting how he does it. For instance, the enemies in the Jewish community were three. One, the regular enemy that everybody has, people that you don't like, sometimes for good and sufficient reasons, sometimes because you sleep well. But whatever you private reason. And he says about Jesus that if which prayer? I mean, I'm sorry. I was at fault.
I didn't quite hear what you said.
Oh, well, I don't know what I said, but I'll start. The private enemy that everybody has, there's nothing unique about that. People who, for one reason or another, there's a ruptured relationship. But he begins there, and what does he say? That if I discover that on my way to affirm my awareness of God, the language he uses is symbolic. I'm taking my gift to the altar. And then I remember that there is a ruptured relationship between me and someone else, in personal terms. Then at the point of my remembrance, I pick it up. I go back, I find the person that I referred to the other day. Now the second kind of enemy was the member of the Jewish community who had rented his mind and his know-how to the Roman government, the tax collector. For the tax collector would say to the Romans, I know Jewish psychology, and I can get the tribute in a way that a Gentile, a Roman, can't do. I will rent my know-how, my idiom. You can borrow it from Christ. And so that the tax collector was despised because he was a great betrayer. Now how does Jesus, aware now of himself, who also is a Jew, how does he deal with it? Because these two things must not be in permanent conflict. He uses a very quaint phrase. He says that Matthew, or whoever the tax collector was, is a son of Abraham. And he tested it by inviting himself to be a guest in the tax collector's house. And in so doing, he said something of very great psychological significance in terms of what he was working out in the light of his vision. This is what I'm talking about all the time. That if I can, the ultimate intimacy between human beings is to break bread together. Ultimate intimacy. In systems, in social systems in the world, where there is a desert and a gulf between peoples, they will do everything together. Play together, sleep together, work together. They won't eat together. Because when, and why? Well, I'm getting far here. Just let me say it, and then I'll come back. Because when you eat, when you stop to eat, a lot of things that have been trying to catch up with you all day, and you haven't had a chance to pay any attention to, you've been too busy. When you sit down to eat, they come around, and that's why I have never been inclusive of where I am now. I've never been on any college or university campus in my life where people who ate in dining rooms or whatever were satisfied with the food. Not because the food's bad, but because it is the one time when all the things that have been bugging you all day and you haven't had a chance to pay any attention, when you sit down, they say, well, here you are now. And they come and they get mixed up with the taste of the bread and other things and a whole. So that so Jesus said, now this is the clue. If I eat with the tax collector, I do it. And then the Roman, who was the great enemy. There was, and I just have to take a minute to throw it into context for you. The Jewish community at the time that Jesus lived in Palestine had lost its political freedom. It was a vassal of Rome. They were permitted, they meaning the Jewish people, were permitted to have their own private religion. But they did not have, as a Jewish state, they did not have power of veto and certification over the life of a citizen. That's why, for instance, when Jesus was tried and condemned, the Jewish community could not put him to death. The Romans had to do that. Because a state, the autonomy of a state, at last seems to rest on whether or not it has power of life and death over its citizens. So, how can I handle this without destroying the integrity of this awareness, the king, that's it. how did he do it? He rejected one by one